Welcome to Lesson 1-8. The objectives of this lesson is to find the distance between 2 points. And then we're also going to learn how to find the midpoint of a segment, the middle of a segment. Alright, to find the distance, we're going to use this formula called the distance formula. And it's D is equal to x sub 2 minus x sub 1 squared plus y sub 2 minus y sub 1. And what it is we're going to let our first point be our x1 and our y1, and our second point to be x2, y2. And after we establish which one's which, we just have to plug it in to the formula. And then after we square the term and square the other term, this term right here is going to be squared, then we're going to add them, and then notice that then we're going to have to take the square root. So don't forget to take the square root. And usually it'll tell you to round it to something. Okay? Alright, the midpoint formula is, the midpoint is kind of the middle of 2 points. Like this would be the midpoint. And the midpoint is an average. And so you're going to notice it's very similar to an average. So we're going to take our x1 coordinate and our x2 coordinate, and we're going to add them and divide by 2. And that's going to be our x midpoint coordinate. And then we're going to take our y1 coordinate plus our y2 coordinate, and we are going to, my phone is ringing, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. Again, x1 plus y2, or y1 plus y2 divided by 2 is going to give my ym coordinate. So the two coordinates that I create, and see, notice that these have parentheses around it and a little comma there, because I'm going to get my midpoint coordinates, my xm and my ym. Okay, next page. We're going to apply this, put some numbers in. Okay, how far is the subway from Oak, here's Oak, to Symphony? Symphony's up here, so I need to find those coordinates. The coordinates for Oak is -1, -2. -2. And we're gonna let that be our x1, y1. And that's what the key to this is, to go ahead and decide what's gonna be what. So my x1 is gonna be -1, and my y1 is gonna be -2. That way I already know what it is, and I can just sub it in when I get my formula out. The Symphony's coordinates is not on this picture, but it would be over 1 and up 2, so that would be 1, 2. +1, +2. So I'm going to make that be my x2 and my y2 coordinate. So up here I'm going to write myself a little note that x2 is 1 and y2 is 2. And I can use that to help me. I'm going to go ahead and rewrite the distance formula. I'm going to find the distance between these 2 points from Oak and Symphony. And I'm going to take the square root of my x sub 2 minus x sub 1 squared plus y sub 2 minus y sub 1 squared. Now let's plug in. This is not hard. All we just have to do is sub in the numbers and just be careful on the signs. x2 is 1, x1 is -1, and notice I'm going to have a minus there, so I've got to watch my signs. And then right here is my y2, which is 2, and my y1, which is -2. So let's simplify this. We're going to get 1 minus a -1, which makes a plus. So that'll be 2, and 2 minus a -2 is a +4. And so when I square those, remember you got to square them, you get 4 and 16, and 4 plus 16 is 20. Now you're ready to get out your handy dandy calculator and take the square root of 20. And once you take the square root of 20, you're going to get this long decimal, 4.4721, and this just goes on, 3, 5, etc. Okay, 9, etc. But the problem does say to round to the nearest tenth. Let's go back and read directions. And each unit is a mile, so my answer is going to be in miles. So it's going to be rounding 4.5 miles. Now we're going to find the midpoint. To find the midpoint, we're trying to find the middle. And we have these two endpoints, and we're going to find the middle point, the midpoint. So we're going to use the midpoint formula. And we're going to let x1 and y1 be 8 and 9. And we're going to let x2 and y2 be our other coordinate, -6 and -3. And if you ever have trouble with this lesson, just come over here and make you a little table and say, okay, my x1 is going to be 8. My y1 is going to be 9. This just helps. It just helps if you're having trouble. But some of us don't need to do this. And it's okay if you don't. But if you feel like you do this, and it will help you keep from making mistakes. I'm going to write the formula for a midpoint. And remember, it's kind of like the average. So it's x1 plus x2 divided by 2. And y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So let's plug in. So I'm going to do 8 plus -6. And I'm going to get a positive 2. And 2 divided by 2 is 1. That is my first coordinate of my midpoint. And what I did was I substituted 8 for x1 and -6 for x2. So now I'm going to do my y1 and y2. y1 is 9 and y2 is -3. So I'm going to subtract those and I get 6 divided by 2, which is 3. That is my y coordinate of my midpoint. My midpoint is 1, 3. So I put in 9 here and -3. So my midpoint is 1, 3. Okay? Now this is the more challenging example of this lesson. I'm not trying to worry you, but this is challenging. I've taught this for a while, and this is a little bit challenging. I want to kind of show you what's going on. You actually know the midpoint. You have this segment, and it's called DG. And you know the midpoint, the middle. You know it. It's -1, 5. One of the endpoints is 1, 4. So I know this endpoint, and I know this, but I don't know that one. Well, we can take the formula for midpoint, and we can manipulate it to find that. So instead of looking for the midpoint, we're going to take the midpoint formula, and we know the midpoint, and we know our x1, and we know our y1. We know one endpoint. But we are going to be looking for and solving for the x2 and the y2. So I am going to have to kind of do two separate equations using each piece of this to get y1 or x2 and y2, get them by themselves and solved. Okay, well, let's have a look. We're going to take our midpoint formula and we're going to focus on one coordinate at a time. Over here, I'm going to focus on the x coordinate, and over here, I'm going to focus on the y. Do this on your homework. Do this on your homework. We actually know the x coordinate of our midpoint. It's in right here. It's -1. So I'm going to put -1 here. I know the answer. I know the answer. And so now I'm trying to find the other endpoint. I know one endpoint, and that's D is 1, 4. So I'm going to put 1 here because 1 is my x1. 1 is my x1. So, I'm going to solve for x2, the other endpoint. Now let's look. We're adding a number to x and we're dividing by 2. In order to undo that, we are going to have to get rid of that dividing by 2 by multiplying the whole problem by 2. When I multiply the whole problem by 2, I'm going to get a negative 2 here. And I'm going to actually get rid of that 2 there. And I'm just left with 1 plus y2. Or x2, that's x2. 1 plus x2. Then I'm going to subtract the 1 over to the other side, and I'm going to get a negative 3. And that is my first coordinate of my endpoint right here, negative 3. I just want to reiterate something. We know our x midpoint is negative 1. We know our y midpoint is 5. We know our x1, that's one of our endpoints, and that was 1. And we know our y1, which is 4. And I'm just getting this from the problem. Now I need to find my other one. And we just found one of them was negative 3. But that's what we're trying to do. So we're just plugging in to the midpoint formula, and now we're isolating a different variable. And it's going to take 2 steps. And you're always going to multiply by 2 to get rid of the half, and then you're going to subtract the other to the other side. It's as simple as that. Multiplying by 2, subtract over to the other side, get your x2 or y2 by itself. Now let's watch me closely as I do the y coordinate. This is the y coordinate on the other side. We know our midpoint y coordinate. It's right here. It's 5. We know that. It's 5. It's up here at 2. It's 5. And we know the other endpoint. The other endpoint is 1, 4. So 4 is the y, your y1. Now we're going to get rid of the 2. So we're going to multiply each side by 2. And when we do that, we get rid of this half here. But then I need to multiply this side by 2 also, and I get the 10. And then now I'm left with 4 plus y2 is equal to 10. So I subtract the 4 to the other side, and I get 6. And so my y2 is 6. So my other endpoint for G is negative 3, 6. Okay, this is totally doable. Use this example. Watch it again as you work an example like that. Let's go back up. I want to fill in the blanks for you. I kind of taught it without the blanks because I didn't want to be thought that might help not. But this was your x1 coordinate, which is 1, and this is 4, and this is negative 1 and 5 was your midpoint. And so we're trying to solve for our x2 and our y2. So let's go back over this one just one more time. I want you to separate it out into 2 equations. Do your x coordinate on one side and your y coordinate on the other. And set them equal. You know the midpoint. You know what it's equal to. You know the other endpoint, so now you're going to solve for the other endpoint. And you're always going to multiply by 2 to get rid of that half, and then you're going to subtract over to the other side, and it just works. Alright, well, if you have any problems, you know where to get me. I will talk to you later.